It's 12 noon. We're live on City Line. Hi, I'm Jackie Hall.
And I'm Dan Henson. You know, has the black middle class forgotten its people?
Some people in the community feel that once some black Americans reach high economic status, that they flee to the suburbs.
Others say that once blacks have reached middle class status, they should attempt to help their people who are less fortunate.
Could the decline of memberships in black organizations and the plight of black institutions be a result of middle-class blacks forgetting their people?
Viewing school desegregation 30 years later. I'm T. Montia, and we'll take a look at how far we've come.
And on the entertainment page, we have a tantalizing Tina Turner singing Let's Stay Together, and former member of the Temptations, Dennis Edwards, doing his single Don't Look Any Further.
Gary Puckrein and Russ Johnson will be here to discuss, has the black middle class forgotten its people?
It's all of this and more as City Line continues.
Hi, and welcome back to City Line. We're happy to be with you this afternoon. We've got a very exciting show, I think, today on a subject that really has been bounced around in more barbershops than it has probably in the academic sphere, although we do have an academician with us today. Gary Puckrein is the publisher of a magazine, a quarterly magazine called American Visions, and is also an associate professor at Rutgers University. Russ Johnson is with us also, and he is the president of the Black United Fund. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Russ, let me just start off by asking you the question. I mean, has the black middle class forgotten its people?
Let's define middle class.
Okay.
If you talk about people making certain kinds of income, if you're talking about having a certain position in the world in terms of the community, then you have to be talking about the majority of people who are very involved in all phases of the economic, political, and social aspects of the community, whether it be a Perrin Mitchell, whether it be yourself, whether it be Billy Murphy. These are the middle class. And if you look historically at Angela Davis, as Booker T. Washington, and all these other folks who were middle class, you see that they've given a lot of energy and effort to the movement of rectifying the ills of the society in terms of eliminating racism, as they have formed organizations like the NAACP and the Urban League.
The traditional black middle
That's
class
right.
then is the black bourgeoisie.
That's right.
Now,
Yeah.
well, but answer the question. Have they forgotten their people?
No, I don't think so. If we look at the statistics, let's talk about gift giving. If we look nationally in terms of general gift giving of the of the population of the United States, we talk about 1.8% of the money has been given in terms of generally. If we look at major corporations giving money, we talk about 1.2% of that money is being given. If you look at the black community, you talk about 1.5%. So all of it's about the same. I think what we have to do is come up with the mechanisms, the methodology, the strategies of how to entice and market that process in terms of the product that you're attempting to sell.
Okay, let's have Gary answer the same question. Has the black middle class forgotten its people, Gary?
I don't think the black middle class has forgotten its people. I think the circumstances have changed. The traditional black elite, and we can go back as early as the 17th and 18th century, were very much involved in questions related to civil rights, eliminating slavery, the post-emancipation period being directly related to getting greater access into the political process. I think post-1960 has meant that the black middle class, the agenda has changed. It's created some sense of loss. I mean, insofar as it's not precisely clear what the new agenda is. And there are all sorts of organizations developing throughout the country, from theater groups to black self-help groups. And I think the point is that in the next decade, I think what we're going to find is that the agenda will be refined, and the sense of lack of goal will disappear.
Gary, well, first of all, let me remind everybody at home that you can join in our discussion by calling us at 481-1313. This is a live show, and we'd like to get some of your phone calls in. But Gary, let me just go back to what Russ started off doing. Let's define the black middle class. Who are these people? Well, everybody keeps talking about.
You know, the black middle class, there are actually two black middle class. There's the traditional black elite, that dates back to the 17th century. Out of this group are, I mean, in Washington, where I'm presently reside, there are a large number of people who can trace their ancestries back to the 17th and 18th century. Then there's a new black middle class which emerged out of the 60s.
But Gary, is that first group still an economic status that we're talking about?
Yes,
that
absolutely.
Can trace their
yes,
back?
absolutely.
Okay, so it's an income. It's an income level.
It's an income level. It's a style level. Okay. It's a sense of roots.
Your second group.
Yeah, the second group, the new black middle class. Their history is very different. I mean, rather than going to segregated schools, and talking about the traditional black colleges now, they were segregated in the sense that they were created to give an opportunity for blacks to get college education. The new black middle class has gone to Ivy League schools, they've gone to the mainstream schools. They have a sense that the world is theirs. For example, between 1960 and 1970, the number of blacks attending colleges has doubled. Their orientation is a bit different.
And so both of our guests today would contend that the black middle class has not, in fact, forgotten its people, that, in fact, it's just doing what it ought to do.
I think the responsibility of all of the people in the society is to find the strategies and the methodology about which, how to go back and upreach and pull up the other the segment of the population who might have been
we're going to continue our
forgotten.
discussion on this and see what the people at home think about it right after this.
Live, and the question is, has the black middle class forgotten its people? And Gary and Russ, I'd like to ask you. Both of you seem to agree that the black middle class has not forgotten its people. If it has not, then how do we explain the plight of black institutions, our colleges, Fisk University, certainly to name one, just one, and how do we explain the plight of the NAACP, which announced not long ago that it was having money problems, having problems getting money in.
Okay.
How do you explain all of that?
Let me do this, and I'll take about a minute, and then I'll turn it on to Gary. I was talking to Barbara Cooper just a couple of days ago about this thing. Yeah, oh, sure, yeah. And she agreed. She said the black middle class is complacent, they're irresponsible, and they don't adhere to the responsibilities of uplifting those other folks who they've left behind. She also indicated that the budget for the year was about $100,000, and they have about 5,000 in membership. And in contrast to the 1,800 other NAACP chapters that are formed in the country. And this was one of the top 10, if you will, in the country, with only 5,000 membership in a city of 500,000.
Help us to focus.
Okay.
What is the point?
Okay. The point is, in spite of her frustration about saying that, you know, they have ignored the plight of the masses of people, and they've gone to the suburbs, and they don't be responsive in terms of membership and that kind of thing, and they don't help us to develop this organization. She said the secret is, though, we have to learn better marketing techniques. And I think that's key. I say I think it would be irresponsible for me to take a position in developing the Black United Front, as I talk to a lot of people, to say that the black middle class has abdicated its responsibility when I can look at a history of that not being so.
Well, Gary, how can you explain the plight of Fisk University and other black institutions around the country, where the funding is at a low now and the alumni doesn't appear to be coming forth, and the money just simply is not there?
Well, let me say two things. First of all, institutions like Fisk University, Howard, the traditional black colleges have faced the real problem that the agenda's changed somewhat. Once upon a time, they didn't have to compete for black students with the Browns, the Howards.
A captive audience.
Yes. I mean, they had a captive market. I think the situation now is that they've got to gear themselves up for a new situation in which they literally have to go out and persuade students that they get the finest education possible there. What I'd also say, though, I think is important, is that the black middle class is afraid to say that it's middle class. The idea of being...
Well, you know, that's interesting. You raised the point about the black elite, the traditional black elite. that is a negative connotation to a lot of people. I mean, they don't want to be perceived as members of the black elite. It's probably going back to E. Franklin Frazier's black bourgeoisie, which was seen as a negative. And so a lot of people are afraid to admit they still want to be one of the brothers and sisters on the corner at the same time that they have risen to the black middle class.
I think it's an important issue. It's not just a problem for black Americans. I mean, white Americans also feel very hostile to the idea of being middle class. The point is, though, that the middle class is where the expertise is at, and they've got to take the leadership role.
All righty. Let's bring in our home audience at this point. Hi, you're live on City Line. What's your feeling about whether or not the black middle class has forgotten its people?
Good morning, Jackie. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning.
My concern is that when they say that they haven't forgotten the people, only instances or references I can see as blacks, when they get to a certain level, they imitate white people. They, they do what white people do. They go to places that white people go. They try to have what white people go. And there's no feedback to where they came from. I mean, you can look around and you can see the great difference between people who have made it at the top, and then you go in a certain neighborhood and you see the people still at the bottom. I mean, when they do get to a certain level, they don't use the knowledge or the expertise, to feed it back into their neighborhoods or their communities. They go out and live in the suburbs.
Okay, let our guests respond to it.
And I think
that is one of the popular charges that we pick up once we achieve middle class status and we move away from the traditional neighborhoods. Why?
And that's happened in a lot of cases. And again, I got to go back to the same theme. And it's very important for us to understand that if we don't use our imagination and creativity and our innate abilities and talents and resources to come up with a better mechanism about how to garner support from all of the people, then we're always going to sit back and be divisive and say, well, he's not supporting me, and then they don't, and I hate them because they drive.
Well, Russ, in 1984, why isn't that being done?
One of the reasons that's not...
If indeed there is the commitment.
One of the reasons that's not being done, because there isn't a commitment, because we haven't come up with the methodology to make it a commitment in the people's consciousness. Wait a minute. What I'm trying to say is that when you talk to blacks and you say, what is the nature of your own culture? Tell me what's different from the dominant culture in respect to your culture. Give me the contrast in terms of your sociology, your psychology, your philosophy, and your history. Most blacks don't even know these things about their own culture. And if you don't teach people the historical if you don't historically get them focused on where they are in terms of the cultural nuances, then they're not going to have a sense of identity in terms of what they need to do or who they are.
Okay, but
that's key.
But the charge is that essentially, once we achieve middle class status, we pick up and we move out of the community, as opposed to staying in the community. I mean,
so do whites.
So do whites. But isn't that the goal of the black middle class, Gary?
Well, let me say this. I think that the charge that the black middle class does not help is really inaccurate. If you look across the country, you can look at all sorts of self-help organizations, Adopt a Family, Black Student Fund. There are students in colleges who go out on recruiting missions to bring black students into major universities. I think people, because it's difficult to get a firm sense of the demographics and what's going on out there, have the misguided impression that the black middle class is not doing its job.
Okay, we have someone at the mic.
Oh, I'd like to say no race of people have ever gotten on their feet without having a strong economic foundation. I think the black middle class suffer from a bad case of self-concern. They're more concerned about themselves, but if they could convert that self-concern into concern for others, then they would, all that money that the doctors say they have and all that, these assets that they have, they could build up our economic foundation. I think that's our greatest weakness, that they're too concerned about themselves and that our economic foundation is weak. We're weak in the commercial and the business world.
How do you respond?
Well, my response is that the size of the black middle class increased, is almost doubled in the 1960s and 1970s. There's been some fallback because of the recession in the late 60s and 70s, but it's a very new class. It's just acquiring wealth.
How fragile is the black middle class in terms of economic status?
2 weeks from...
2 paychecks away from foreclosure?
Right, that's right. At least paychecks, 2 paychecks. One of the things that if we look at statistics, we see that it's estimated by Deepak Gibson and some others who wrote the book, The $70 Billion in Black book, that the black middle class takes in, I mean, the blacks generally take in, in terms of gross national product, about $150 billion a year. 150 billion. That's equal to the 9th largest successful nation in the world. That's a lot of money.
But per capita, that doesn't break down to an awful lot of money. I mean, 22 million blacks
26 million blacks.
26 million
Okay.
blacks divided by 150 billion, just
Yeah,
roughly. I mean, that's not a lot of money.
Our resource base is very small. I'm excited by what's going on. Clearly, the number of black businesses are increasing. Black people are getting more involved in the American economic system, an economic system that historically limited their abilities.
All righty. Again, a call from home. Hi, you're live on City Line.
Hi, good afternoon. My question is, we have a black entertainer who's very well known. His name is Michael Jackson. He's quoted as being worth approximately $49 million. My question to you is, where is his effort? We're emulating him. We're stimulating his business. We're stimulating his profits. But yet and still, I don't hear of him taking some of these millions of dollars and building an institution of technology to train young black children to do something. He cannot possibly spend $49 million in his lifetime.
All righty. Hold on and let them respond.
What is the responsibility of black entertainers and black superstar athletes?
It is their responsibility to come back to the community, to uplift that community, to establish a new quality of life for that community in terms of the economics and the business and the politics of it all. Again, I say, if we don't come up with a mechanism, if we don't come up with the strategies, if we don't come up with the methodology in terms of how that, to institute or to put it in place, those organizations that will adjust themselves to those needs.
Ross, who is it that determines that Michael Jackson has to give up his $49 million for anyone?
No, I think it's a matter of raising of the consciousness level of Michael Jackson.
I mean, but why should we expect Michael Jackson to give up his money to build an institution for someone else?
Well, I think if we look at the history of what Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman and Booker T. Washington, all those folks have done for us up to this point to get us this far, it is our responsibility to get the next generation a step beyond.
All righty. Thank you for that answer. We're going to take a break and come back and discuss additional responsibilities of the black middle class. Stay with us.
We're back and continuing our discussion of how has the black middle class forgotten its people with our guest Gary Puckrein, the publisher of American Visions magazine, and Russ Johnson, who is the president of the Black United Fund. Just before we went away, I had a burning question I wanted to ask you, which is essentially, how has integration affected the growth of the black middle class, as opposed to segregation, where we had to deal with each other, where we were sensitive to the needs? I mean, now we've got open housing, we've got open accommodations, we can go to the Hilton now, we don't have to go to Brown's Motel. Has that had a negative effect or a positive effect?
Well, I think some negative, some positive. I think the area I'm most concerned about is that while integration has happened, we can go into the Hilton and what have you. White America doesn't patronize our places, partly because of negative stereotyping and a long history, but also because in here is where the black middle class needs to become more aggressive. It needs to give the direction. It needs to make people understand that Afro-American culture is very rich and has some very important things to offer. And there requires leadership and perhaps a bit of elitism.
But incorporated in your statement, though, Gary, is a sense, too, that not only do other ethnic groups have negative impressions of our institutions, but that our own middle class has negative impressions of our own institutions.
I agree.
And that is why maybe we flee to the suburbs and flee to the places that are not black.
Well, you know, I think it's a complicated question. I mean, and there is this kind of underlying, one gets the sense, there's this underlying sense of negativism. I went to a movie last night, very quick, and it was clear that some of the characters were being portrayed as blacks, and the stereotyping was very negative. This Gremlins, Steven Strasberg's new movie. Negative stereotyping, so that if you're a restaurateur, Afro-American restaurateur, you cannot get white people into your establishment.
So it's carried through in the mass media. All right, let's bring in another caller from home. Hi, you're live on City Line.
Yes. One point that I wanted to make is that, first of all, I think that when we look at the black middle class today, the black middle class are where they are because of sacrifices their parents made and because of the civil rights activities of the 60s. I think that today the black middle class lacks the same sacrifices or lacks the commitment to make the same sacrifice that their parents made for them.
I think the black middle class is too materialistic. We want to live like the Joneses being the white middle class. And I just don't think that we are making the investment in our children's future that our parents made for us. Instead, we are buying Mercedes and JAGUARS and Pierre Cardin suits.
Very good point. Thank you for the call. We'll have our guests answer that now.
I absolutely disagree. I think the black middle class ought to be materialistic. We've got to establish an economic base. We've got to think about putting more money into our own pockets so that we can have some impact on the American process. And to say that we're too materialistic, I think really understates.
No, I disagree on that. I think I think he was referring to a conspicuous consumption kind of process where we tend to buy the Cadillacs and the Mercedes. For instance, let's take a statistic. In 1976, it said that, and I was reading Deepak Gibson's book again, the $70 billion in black. He said the black America spend 10% of their income for whiskey. That's out of $70 billion, that's $7 billion. That's a lot of money.
And often top line.
Oh, no question about that. And we buy 49% of all the grape soda made, 30% of all the Coca-Cola made, etc., and goes on and on. I think that we have to stop spending our money for gold, diamonds, and silver and big cars and begin to reinvest those kind of monies back into our community. And I say
Well, Russ, I would disagree with you humbly just a little bit. I mean, gold, diamonds, and silver are good economic investments over a long period of time. Whiskey is a lousy investment. Grape soda is a lousy investment.
Right.
Coca-Cola a lousy investment. Gold, diamond, and silver builds the economic base.
Well, it really has no practical value, but okay, I can understand that if you're going to collect gold and talk about real, but I'm talking about a gold ring and the gold bracelets and all. We spend an inordinate amount of money for these kind of little trinkets. When we need to reinvest that money back into human life and education and uplifting the community, that's very important, more important than gold and diamonds around my neck.
Well, what it does, isn't that the physical sign that we make to folk that we've arrived and that we are different?
That's a whole focus on purchasing conspicuous consumption items to pretend that we have arrived, right?
Okay.
And that's what we have to be deprogrammed away from.
Okay, we have another caller. Hi, you're live on City Line.
Hello. My question is, with all the organizations that we have and the information that blacks have access to nowadays, is it still the black middle class's responsibility to continue to help make a better way for blacks? I understand that it would be nice, I guess, to have a black who is more fortunate than I am to help pave the way for me. But is it their continued responsibility to keep on babysitting these people who are not going out to the libraries or whatever to find out what else they can do to
help themselves?
Okay, but
I think the caller has asked a $64 question.
No question, the libraries are empty and the bars are crowded. I agree. Now, by the same token, it's the responsibility of all of us, middle class or not middle class, whatever you perceive yourself, to begin to come up with the strategies, again, I got to repeat, the strategies and the methodologies about how to uplift the rest of the race.
Russ, who is we?
All of us, me, you, all of us. I'm involved in the Black United Fund, and I decided to get involved because I knew there was a need for a fundraising organization to put money back into the community.
Let Gary answer as well.
I think the point here is that if the black middle class doesn't do it, who is going to take on the responsibility? And I think that's the fundamental question. And we cannot run from the leadership question. And I would argue that we're not running from the leadership question. I think our resources are small, and we're building those resources and putting them in place. But I think we're on the move.
Let me say something, too. There was a summit conference held in Nashville about 3 weekends ago of 100 and some black organizations, and that indeed was one of the conclusions that came out of that summit, that the middle-class black community must make a commitment to change the plight of all black people. As you said, Gary, if the middle class doesn't do it, then who will?
But I mean, let's look at the statistics, though. The black middle class, we're talking about the new black middle class, which is the most the nouveau riche. It's the most sizable part of the black middle class. Very young. I mean, average age is between 30 and 40. They're just getting their careers underway. They don't have large pools of money, but I think they're being responsive.
Okay, we're going to continue our discussion on Has the Black Middle Class Forgotten Its People right after this.
little time left in our discussion of whether or not the black middle class has forgotten its people that we're going to rush through this as quickly as we can and get it in as many points. We have a question at the mic.
Yes. We're speaking about the middle class, African American, whether or not he has forgotten the plight of his people. But I think the question should be broadened to deal with all stratosphere of the African American community and what we need to do in order to improve the condition of all of us. We don't want to remain middle class. We want to move into the higher class and be a real force in demonstrating leadership to the nation and eventually the world.
Okay. A response?
I think Afro-Americans have something very unique to offer the world. The Afro-American people in this country made the words of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington reality. And we have that to offer. And I would agree that the black middle class, it has to work on its community problem, but I think the world has something to learn from the black experience.
That was a very good question.
Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand, and never has and it never will. And the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. If you continue to let the economic, political, and the social processes being antithetical to your development as a community, then you deserve what you get. All of us have to get up and begin to lift ourselves out of this morass of racism.
But isn't it interesting that we often imitate?
No question.
Imitate that which is oppressive?
No question, because that's the programming of the system. It's that pervasive. And we have to break the programming.
Let's talk about imitation. I mean, imitation is supposed to be the sincerest form of flattery.
Certainly.
But in all instances, it is not. The question, has the black middle class forgotten its people, implies money. Implies that we need to put money back into the black community.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think, how most people read it. But the way way that we tend to attempt to put money back into the community is something that I call banquetitis. We decide that here's a problem that we want to address by raising some money for it, and so what we do is we have a banquet. So what do? We hire the Hilton, or we hire the Hyatt, or whatever, and right away we throw a banquet. We charge $50 a person for the banquet, and 80% of that goes to the caterer.
And 80% of the people can't get there for $50 a person. Let me say that $1.5 billion was estimated to be raised last year by the black community, okay, of which that 80...
Baltimore.
No, well, I mean, the United States, about 1%, 10%, if you will, of the gross national product of the black community. And 80% of that went to churches. So we have to make our churches and their outreach programs more responsive to the needs of feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and housing the homeless. That's what we have to do as a people. We have to all get involved and make sure the economic uplift happens in our community by using our imagination, creativity, talents, efforts, and resources.
Okay.
That's all of us have to do that.
Let's bring in another caller from home. Hi, do you have a point to make concerning the black middle class?
Yes, I'm considered to be a black middle class person. I'm a teacher. I teach in the suburbs. However, I lived in the city all my life. I did not want to teach in the suburbs. The job was offered to me. We do not always just get up and leave the city. However, now that I'm there, I find that a lot of black parents that have students in the suburbs tell their children, don't listen to your black teachers. I'm a teacher. And also, I would like to say to our guests, sometimes you have to think the circumstances present themselves to us, being the people which are considered middle class, to go places not necessarily where we want to go. But since we're there, we try to make the best of a bad situation. Now, I myself would like to say that I would prefer to teach in a city school. I can't teach there right now. And I'm living in the suburbs, not that I like it, because I don't go anyplace. I stay in my apartment 24 hours most of the time. I'm not teaching. However, I go back to the area where I came from. I have a sister who's getting ready to go to college. She's going to a black college. I came from a black college.
Okay, you've raised some points that we'd like our guests to respond to, if you will. Thank you for the call.
I think clearly there needs to be a move of a gentrification move by the black middle class back into some of the urban centers. That clearly, if you're going to give leadership and direction, you've got to be there on the spot. I think one of the ways to improve black schools is for the black middle class to move back into some of the urban centers. Hopefully at some point that'll happen. It needs to be encouraged. It needs to be talked about at the very least. I think that's part of the agenda that needs to get
Well, Gary, you're centered in Washington right now, and in Washington you've got a huge outflow of blacks from D.C., the capital. I mean, Chocolate City is what it's been called in the past. You've got a huge outflow of blacks into Prince George and Montgomery County there, in the northern suburbs of Virginia. Is that affecting significantly the growth of blacks in D.C.?
Well, clearly, the brain drain, as I think about it, out of the black community has to have an impact. we need to learn how to stabilize our community such that we want to live there. And I think part of that is moving back in and fighting the good fight.
Okay. Well, again, if I can get you to answer in just a few seconds, has the black middle class forgotten its people, Gary?
I think absolutely not.
No, I think that as we have looked at historically, the individuals who have led the movement in terms of socioeconomic and political justice have always been the middle class.
Okay, and that just has to be continued.
Yeah, that has to be continued, and we have to come up with stratagems and new ideas of how to make that continue.
Thank you both so very, very much, Gary Puckrein and Russ Johnson. We thank you for being with us today. We're going to take a break, and T. Montier will be here with the news.
Good afternoon. Topping today's newscap. It was 30 years ago that the U.S. Supreme Court handed down the decision that outlawed school segregation. And though progress has been made, desegregating America's schools was not easy in 1955, and it is not easy today. We get a report from Dick Sanders.
30 years ago, the Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision written by Chief Justice Earl Warren, ruled that segregated schools were inherently unequal and therefore unconstitutional. The case was titled Brown versus the Board of Education after Linda Brown of Topeka, Kansas, a third grader who had to walk a half mile to catch a bus to a black school 2 miles away when there was a white school only blocks away. In 1951, her father and other black parents went to court and lost until the Supreme Court ruled. In recent interviews, Linda Brown Smith, now 41, recalled that all she wanted to do was go to school with Mona and Guinevere because that's who she played with every day. Her comment on integration today.
It's still very disheartening to me because we find after 30 years that the mandates of Brown have still not been met. Desegregation of schools is definitely an issue today as it was 30 years ago.
In 1979, Mrs. Smith, as a parent of 2, joined another lawsuit, still pending, which seeks greater racial balance in Topeka schools. Dick Sanders, ABC News, Washington.
Last week on City Line, we reported there were 21 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. That number was correct, but as of this November, there will be 20 members. Congresswoman Katie Hall of Indiana was unsuccessful in her re-election bid. She steps down in November, being replaced by a white. A bank has threatened to foreclose on the suburban Silver Spring, Maryland home of Congressman Louis Stokes of Ohio. Court documents show that Stokes and his wife have fallen over $2,000 behind in their mortgage payments since February. In a statement issued by his office, Stokes said the cost of sending his children to college and unexpected medical expenses have created a temporary hardship for him. A black Muslim Marine who testified that he refused to join his Beirut-bound unit so he would not have to shoot at fellow Muslims was demoted Thursday, given a bad conduct discharge, and sentenced to 4 months confinement. Reginald Reynolds has a report.
Corporal Alfred Griffin came to court hoping to convince a military judge that he should not be punished for going AWOL and missing a troop movement. His hopes were too high. Judge Charles Bream sentenced him to just about the maximum punishment allowed under military law.
I protest my sentence, and I'm going to go a little bit beyond just protesting it. I am going to fast until I am released, until I receive justice, which is what I was supposed to receive when I entered that court.
I am regretful that we did not move the military judge far enough, that he couldn't bring himself to walk the required mile and to give Corporal Griffin what would have amounted to far more lenient treatment.
Griffin says he refused to go to Lebanon because he couldn't fight against his Muslim brothers. The prosecutors argue that his first allegiance was to his fellow Marines.
The Marine Corps has a procedure for conscientious objectors or persons that, however you want to characterize it, do not feel they can participate in any kind of a combat situation for religious beliefs. And what he should have done was gone through his chain of command, made that apparent to his chain of command, and they probably would have been able to do something about it.
Griffin's attorneys have asked that he remain free until he has a chance to appeal. But the prosecutor rejected that motion, so tonight Griffin is spending the first of 4 months in military jail.
After weeks of complaining about media coverage of his presidential campaign, the Reverend Jesse Jackson has moved to provide telephone callers from across the nation daily 5-minute phone messages on his positions. The new phone service kicks off tomorrow, Monday, and is available to anyone with a telephone. It is capable of handling up to 14,000 calls a day. Anyone interested in listening to the pre-taped Jackson messages may do so by calling 1-900-401-VOTE. Again, that number is 1-900-401-VOTE. Again, that service does not start until tomorrow. After a woman passes the grand old age of 25, chances of finding a husband deteriorate rapidly. So says a group of Princeton University researchers. Their study has found that in the 20 to 24 age range, there are 126 suitable white men for every 100 suitable white women. For black women in that age range, there are 93 suitable men for every 100 women. But once the lady reaches 25, the number of bachelors available to her shrinks significantly. With the season of proms, graduations, and summer vacations, the government is launching a campaign against drunk drivers with the help of superstar Michael Jackson. Here's a report from Patricia Sagan.
Well, they didn't get him, but through the iron fence of the White House, they did manage a glimpse of the 25-year-old idol upstaging the former Hollywood movie star turned president with a wave of his famous sequin glove. Normally reserved White House staffers left their offices to gape a bit, too.
Well, isn't this a thriller?
It's as much Michael Jackson's squeaky clean private lifestyle as well as his incredible superstardom that the White House wants to use as the hook to capture the attention of the nation's teenagers. This sobering music video public service ad is what they will see on television soon.
Just get in and talk about it.
I've got to go home.
Oh, come on, Carrie. We're going to a new place.
She wants to go home, right? Let's go.
Whoa.
You okay to drive?
Yeah, I'm fine.
You sure?
Relax.
What's a few beers?
If you don't stop your friend from drinking and driving, you're as good as dead. Drinking and driving can kill a friendship.
Jackson has donated the rights to use the song Beat It in the ad. The president gave him an award for public service in communication and praised him for the example he sets.
Michael Jackson is proof of what a person can accomplish through a lifestyle free of alcohol or drug abuse. People young and old respect that, and if Americans follow his example, then we can face up to the problem of drinking and driving. And we can, in Michael's words, beat it.
But if fans still held out that hope that Jackson would perform for this polite but adoring audience, they were disappointed as the shy entertainer said only thanks over the screams of the crowds outside.
I'm very, very honored. Thank you very much, Mr. President and Mrs. Reagan.
That's all. No dancing, no singing, just a brief glimpse of a superstar. This is Patricia Sagan at the White House.
And finally, an industrious 9th grader at Northern Junior High School is City Line Student of the Week. Tina Jennings placed 5th in the citywide Geography Bee. She is a student council representative and a member of the French choir. Tina enjoys roller skating, ice skating, and playing soccer. Next year, Tina plans to attend Mergenthaler Vocational Technical High School, where she will study computers. Congratulations to Tina Jennings, City Line Student of the Week. And that is today's newscap. I'm T. Montier. More with Jackie and Dan. Up next, have a good day.
We have one of the most explosive entertainers ever. That's Tina Turner and also Dennis Edwards singing their hits.
Boy, those are fantastic videos. Man, I like those. What do you think about Tina Turner?
Woo! when I grow up, I want to be just like her.
Well, when I grew up, no, I don't want to be just like her. That won't quite do well. But I got nothing but admiration for the lady. You know, in the Dennis Edwards video, we said it was Dennis Edwards. Dennis Edwards' name obviously is on the record. But the lady with him is an up-and-coming, rising superstar by the name of Saida Garrett. And I think you'll be hearing big things about her in the future.
Indeed. And
now about next week's show.
Yes, yes. We have a special salute to Michael Jackson.
This is a secret. Don't tell anybody. You probably won't have to tell anybody. Just kind of keep this quiet. Salute to Michael Jackson next week. And what are we going to do, Jackie?
Well, we will have Baltimore's own look-alike, dance-alike,
act-alike finalists. We'll have the finalists from the over 12 competition, and we'll also have the fantastic, sensational 5-year-old Tony Williams, who is just about the cutest thing you ever saw, dancing and acting like Michael Jackson. And so you won't want to miss that. But we're also going to have author Mark Bego, or Bego, I believe it is, who has written a book called Michael Jackson.
Exactly, which gives us the real story about Michael Jackson, the background material, and also why we worship him so.
And we'll get the whole thing about, you know, how Michael did everything and how he came along through the Jackson 5 and how he's become what he is now. But you know, the fact is that one of the things that people always talk about is how much money Michael Jackson has now. Well, Mark Bego has looked into that and he knows the answer, and you got to tune in next week to do it. Now,
if you want to be in our studios next week, please give us a call at 481-1313 and reserve your space. Now, you can almost bet that we're going to be booked up. So if you want to be in the studio with us, you're going to have to do it right now, 481-1313.
You're going to have to give us a call, and you're going to have to reserve your seat because, believe it or not, the phone's already ringing off the hook, I'm sure. But keep calling back, and we'll try to get as many people in as possible. Also, one of the things that we try to remind you of at all times is if you want to give us an idea, because we get our ideas from you. If you want to give us some ideas about a show or give us some comments on a show, you can write us here at Channel 13, WJZ Television, Baltimore, Maryland, 21211, and that's on Television Hill. And we'll take a look at whatever you write and decide whether or not we want to do a show on it. Most of our ideas do come from the audience.
By the way, a friend of mine told me over the weekend that her letter was read and we made her an instant star.
Fantastic. We really appreciate your letters. That's this week's edition of City Line. I'm Dan Henson.
I'm Jackie Hall.